guys, and thanks for joining me on another episode of Design and a Half. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about project stakeholders and mainly about how to avoid conflicts with project stakeholders and especially how to deal with them in general. Just because I think this is one huge topic that a lot of junior designers as well as more senior designers have trouble dealing with, and I think it could probably easily be avoided just with simple things like involving project stakeholders from the beginning of the project, making sure communication is as good as possible with them, and trying to explain them throughout the whole process, whatever is going on, trying to be as transparent with whatever it is that you're doing as possible, and making sure that they understand, first of all, where you're coming from as a designer, and second of all, what your needs are, as well as trying to understand their point of view and sort of their needs from a business perspective or from a technical perspective, because let's face it, whenever you're talking about a project, even if it's design, if it's development, if it's whatever, you're talking about people with different types of backgrounds that are basically stakeholders in your project, and each one of those people has a specific claim to the project. So one of them perhaps is an architect in the project that wants to make sure that all the technology stack that the product that's used, that's being built, is going to be as up to date as possible. Someone else is probably going to be in the financial department and wants to be making sure that all of the project is not sort of overlapping the established budget that was discussed when the project actually started. Then you have design, obviously, as stakeholders, and development as well. So each one of them basically has not necessarily their own agenda, but their own personal objectives and their own business objectives in terms of the project that you're participating in. And I think it's always worthy to keep in mind that all of these goals combined basically give you the finished product. So it's not necessarily a discussion about my goals are more important than his, but it's all about all of our goals combined are as important to produce a high quality product and produce a product that comes out fast on the market and is able to hit the target in the best time possible, with the highest amount of quality and so on. So the way I found it that to include stakeholders is, whenever I think about a project and whenever I'm starting a project, I'm always trying to think who the people are that are most likely to be involved, and try to get them all in the kickoff meeting and sort of get their own input about what they expect out of the project, like what their expectations are in terms of timeline, in terms of perhaps budget, in terms of what they want as an outcome from a design point of view, like how they want to proceed, who is going to take care of what, sort of who is leading what part of the project, and that sort of discussion. And sort of the reason why I'm saying this is because those discussions are important, because communication is oftentimes the one thing that makes or breaks the projects in the long term. Execution rarely is. Like, execution is something that's being done standard because we all come from the assumption that everyone wants to do their job, and this is oftentimes true. It's not necessarily that I don't want to do my job, or he doesn't want to do his job, or someone just wants to screw you over. No, but basically all of you are involved into the same project. You're basically trying to build something which is really good, and all of you want to sort of succeed. Nobody wants to fail, obviously. So the thing is that you always have to keep that in mind whenever you're involving all of these stakeholders, and try to get it across to them as well, so you basically have their buy-in as well whenever you're making or making sort of decisions about the project. And especially as a designers, I found it really useful whenever I made the decision in terms of design to also inform people that were part of the project in terms of, hey guys, look, this is what I was thinking in terms of a solution, but it might impact you on an architectural scale, or it might impact you on an implementation scale, just because, look, this thing might mean that we have to switch off from this technology to another technology, and we might need to include this or this or that. And the reason for that comes from the fact that me personally, as a designer, I'm not necessarily your typical type of designer that only deals with colors and stuff like that. Like, my specific and my background is more technical than your average designer, which means that I'm passionate about understanding programming languages. I'm quite passionate about tech stacks, which means I know a little bit about cloud computing. I know a little bit about how to set up an AWS instance. I know how to run Docker. It's that sort of discussion that normally don't have with designers. And probably that also has to do something with the fact that I'm working in a company that is developing solutions for hybrid cloud, which means that you can have a server on your local premise, basically within your company, as well as have a link to the cloud and basically do some cloud to local orchestration, as well as manage your platform, your hardware platform from the cloud, which is something basically that's really unique and sort of different than the norm that most companies use, which is go towards Azure, go towards AWS and that sort of thing. But getting back on the point, that was the stakeholders. I think it's never difficult to deal with stakeholders unless you want it to be difficult. And why I'm saying this is because working with stakeholders is a lot like trying to understand other people and basically building a relationship with them, understanding their needs and where they're coming from. And to some extent, it's a lot like politics, if you will. You have to be able to understand the motivation of those people, to be able to give them what they want and sort of not let it get to you in terms of amount of work that is done and so on and so forth. So I think in that respect, stakeholder management is a lot like project management, just because project management relies on the fact that you have to keep track of several ongoing things on several tracks, whereas here you have to take care of several people on several tracks that all of them affect the project in some way. Like, for example, on projects, the project's architect might need something different than and might need a different type of approach than the head of engineering or the lead for a specific project. Like, you need to think what his objectives are if you're a designer, or basically even if you're a developer, because this whole concept doesn't necessarily easily apply to developers as it could do to designers, for example. And I think from that perspective, it's really important to keep that in mind while working on a project. So it's not necessarily limiting yourself to think, well, if I'm part of the project as a designer, or if I'm part of the project as a developer, I should probably think only from a developer's perspective, which it's not true. You have to think all of the people that are involved are stakeholders. You are a stakeholder as much as your boss is, as much as your designer colleague is, and basically all of you are stakeholders. What it means to actually be a stakeholder is to have a claim into the project and to be able to be involved in that specific project. Which means that you, by definition, you are interested that specific project comes out decent, comes out nice, works properly, and so on and so forth. Okay. we've talked a little bit about this. Like, let me think about what tips I could probably give you that would work in this situation. So one thing that comes to mind is to sort of, as I said earlier, try to build a relationship with the people that you are working with, but make sure that it's genuine. And whenever you're sort of working with them, don't try to be, I know, artificial and so on. Just try to be yourself and basically be helpful, but be yourself as well. On the other hand, don't let that mean that others should trample you just because you're being nice. Don't let them take advantage of you. That's not what this is about. It's more about you being yourself, but at the same time asserting yourself and making sure that all of you are working together towards the final end of basically completing that project together, not separately. And as I said in one of my earliest videos about communication, make sure to outline how important it is that all of you work together, not separately. Make sure each of you understands that you will only be able to output this if you work together, because any type of project is huge and is basically daunting for any person. So making sure to work together, to be able to collaborate and to involve each other into the process as often as possible. Like try to give tips to people, but at the same time, if you're a designer, try to respect the fact if they don't want your tip. On the other hand, if you're a person that's working on the project, make sure that if you give a tip or sort of give a suggestion, don't make it sound like it also has to happen. Ultimately, the decision of if something ends up in the product or not shouldn't be at the product level. I mean, in a very sort of micro environment. Like, don't try to micromanage. Try to manage the whole picture of how the whole project goes together, not necessarily how like this button looks and stuff like that. That's really petty and it's not going to help with productivity. Rather try to focus on keeping things on track, making sure everyone's aware of the end goal, and sort of this is basically the project manager's objective, to make sure that everyone is aligned at all times, making sure that the project stays on track, that you guys are meeting the deadline, and so on and so forth. So this is his role. Your role is to help him do that. So basically, whenever you give estimations, try to think about how much it actually does take to do it, not necessarily inflate the tasks and the amount of work that you have to do just because you can. Try to be decent about it, because in the end, if the product comes out on time, we all have something to win. But if you are a product manager, on the other hand, don't be an asshole and don't take that as for granted, and don't let that mean that if that person just helped you out because they're decent and they want to get the product out on time, you have to take advantage of them and just like cover them with more work and shit. Like, no, don't do that. Don't be an asshole. Be decent, because that's how you guys win. That's how everybody wins within a project. It's not about who is in it for himself. It's about we're all in this together as a team and we need to figure this thing out. So my final tip in terms of how to deal with stakeholders is to make sure to keep them in the loop as much as possible. Try to talk to them as much as possible. Try to explain your decisions. Try to make sure that everybody understands why you're doing whatever that you're doing. Communication here is absolutely key to be able to have a good relationship with stakeholders. Like it's super important to be communicative, and most of all to be able to be okay with the other person and not start off from the conclusion that there's something shady going on. Like, try and trust each other, because trust and communication is what actually builds a team in the first place. That's my biggest tip that I could give you with this respect. So in the end, no, it's not really impossible to deal with stakeholders. It's difficult at times, especially if you're thinking about personal egos, especially if you're thinking about hidden agendas, and especially if you're thinking about people not being truthful. And that should really give you thought about how the company works, and if those sorts of people are included in the company, you have to really think about whether that sort of company is a good fit for you as a designer or as an employee in general. If you think it is, that's fine. If not, try to find something which more fits your own morals and your own set of values, rather than just be accepting of something which is not okay for you. That's about it from my side, guys. I hope you liked this small video I made for you. As usual, please leave a comment below if you liked it. Share, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Share it with your friends, and have an amazing rest of the week, and probably hear each other on Friday.